there, and I heard, the first thing that I noticed was hearing the rattle of spray paint. And I could smell smoke, cigarette smoke. I'm very sensitive to smells. If someone goes by in a car that's smoking or drinking, I can smell it. You too? I said, yeah. And they wouldn't need police. I'd just say, hey, pull them over. They're drinking. But I smelled the smoke. I heard the rattle. And so I became alert. And sure enough, passing in that little window of sight were 3 boys, probably 16, 17. They were good size. And 2 of them had spray cans. And they were all smoking. And they went past me. And I could hear them then spraying on my garage. So I snuck out very carefully so they couldn't see where I came from, because I didn't want them to know which house I lived in. And I snuck out into the alley, and when I got into the middle of the alley, I saw them. One was on one side spraying my neighbor's garage, one was here spraying mine, and then one was closer to me acting as lookout. And so, but they were all paying attention to their own thing, and the lookout was looking down the alley the other way. So being there, I looked and I just screamed as loud as I could, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Well, the 2 who were down spray paint jumped straight up in the air, and all 3 of them went running down the alley. Well, down a bit is a tall apartment building with a parking area that if you drive through it, you can go through them to the main street. So the 2 farthest away from me with the spray cans went running through there, and I kept running down the alley and toward the closest one. Well, I think smoking must have gotten to him, because I was gaining on him. As I was gaining on him, part of me was going, what are you going to do if you catch him? Well, I had no idea. So I'm running after him, and I see in his body something shifting. And it was almost as if I could read his mind. And I was projecting, but I think it was pretty accurate. His body was signaling to me, what am I doing? I am running from a middle-aged woman. What about my macho, you know? And he stopped. He stopped. And he turned around, he had a cigarette in his mouth, and he was as close as you and I. And I did what had come naturally in the past. I put my hands up and I went, rah! His eyes did what yours did. His mouth dropped open, the cigarette dropped out, he turned and ran the corner. And of course I was in hysterics by then, I was laughing so hard. So that behavior, that ability to scream and have that flexibility was very useful in that context. And I hope to be able to use it again, because it felt wonderful. I highly recommend screaming so that often your whole chest can reverberate, because it really makes you feel good. Years ago, before I ever heard of NLP, I was working with a friend who had done Neo-Reichian body work. Have you ever heard of Reich? Wilhelm Reich? Some of you have. He worked with Freud initially and went off, and he was one of the first American energetic workers. His concept was that we have energy that moves up and down through our body, and that when we shut down, we constrict muscles and organs, and we harm ourselves. And so over years, every trauma we've had, if we close down on it, pretty soon we're constricted in a way that we can, our health is impacted, our emotions are impacted. So we need to open this up. And he developed a series of exercises to do that. And one of them is screaming, but more in a growl way, not up here. Ah! Ah! Growl. And it really reverberates this and loosens it all up. Well, I developed that ability as a child very well. So it's very handy. So when we can contextually and meaningfully change, reframe what's going on, what do we do in our minds? What do you think? Yes, Oliver.
When I begin to do that, I start asking questions.
I start asking questions. Which, what does that mean about your internal representations and processes? What do you do differently with them? So, all right, let me show you. You stand. So think of something that you don't really appreciate that you do. Just and turn this way.
That I do?
Yeah. You don't have to talk about it. I want you to talk about it. Just something you'd like to change.
Okay.
And just nod when you're there.
Okay.
All right. Now notice everything. Now look at the ceiling for a second. Back down. Now think about this behavior and think about it with this question. In what context would that really be useful? Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Now, what did you notice him doing?
A momentary pulling in
And?
thinking, in sort of, kind of almost like the light bulb goes on and he's thinking it.
The eyes start.
Right.
What might that indicate is happening inside?
Organization.
He's doing visual. So initially he was down here, wasn't he? Now, what might that indicate? Remember in your rep systems.
Kinesthetic.
Say again.
Kinesthetic. I mean, is feeling something?
No, it's auditory.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Auditory. So he's probably saying things about it's not good or, yeah. And then when you ask questions, in what context might it be useful? Up, eyes back and forth, searching, coming out of that. So when we're stuck with something and unappreciative, and we change the context for it and ask that question, the mind brings in more resources to that situation.
So like more choices also?
Yes, more choices also. When we when we assign a new meaning to something, we do the same thing in a little different way. But we'll get a chance to play with this. We're going to do an exercise just on context reframing. All right? So, by the way, what is this sort of negotiating? When you go...
Interest rates.
And what are we doing here?
Both sides are trying to come to a...
Win-win.
Yes,
Win-win.
win-win.
And give new meaning to what they want. Now up here, you'll have context and meaning reframes. So what new meanings do you put to this and what you really want? What underlies it? And then what many contexts and new meanings can we add up here? One of the reasons I didn't want us to future pace yesterday, and I didn't realize it until I was working with someone, is that I don't want to do the next part, that future pace, until we really understand this. Reframing. So, we're going to do our first exercise of the day. In threes, A, B, C, A is going to complain about themselves or another person, that I'm too slow. Well, in what context are you too slow? So you might ask them, or they might give you the context. I'm too slow at learning math. Right? Or he's too bossy to me. So it's a comparative thing. It's to something. Right? B and C are going to observe all the cues the person has around this statement. So where do their eyes go? What is their body doing? What's their voice tone around it? To calibrate what is happening with that statement. So if A can use a statement that's real to them, that's even better. Okay? Something that, so in A, if you're A, something that bothers you about you, or someone you're dealing with that you'd like to have a different perspective on. Okay? B and C observe all the cues. They get together and brainstorm a little bit away from A. Just a minute or two. In what different context might this behavior be useful? Each one of them comes up with a context in which this behavior might be useful. They go back. A repeats this. Then B delivers a reframe. And C notices the response in A. Because what you're going for is a shift in all those cues. If A doesn't have a response, C gives their reframe. And B notices, B and C notice. And if you've got more, if you've got 3 or 4, if you've gotten really creative, go ahead and give them, wait, break state, so that, because you don't want to contaminate. Have them take a nice deep breath and say it again. Have A say it again. Different context. Then switch. And discuss, what do you notice, if you're A, what do you notice internally? Are there times that you have a negative response to what is being said to you? Do you go, aha? Do you get confused? What is it that happens when you get this reframe? Another story I like. A little boy was at a gym, a health club, and wandering around. He'd lost his mommy. And he was about 6, 7 years old. And so he accidentally walked into the women's dressing room at the club. And they were all naked, you know, in a women's dressing room. Everybody walks around naked. And this little boy walks in. They all start screaming, and they grab their towels and wrap them around. And he looks at him, he says, "What's the matter? Haven't you ever seen a little boy before?" So sometimes it causes humor, which is, of course, a reframe, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's what you're going to do. Let's do 10 minutes total. So only about 3 minutes each person. And we'll see you in 10 minutes. Go have fun. Oh, I'm sorry. Questions?
Because they're going to try to find a new context, is it important that when we make the statement it's contextual?
Yes. Put it in a context. Mm-hmm. So, my husband is too bossy. Well, that's pretty much putting it in a context, isn't it? He's too bossy with me. Yeah. I mean, why would you care if he was bossy somewhere else? So you probably, or he's too bossy to our children. You could elaborate that context. Yes. Good. Any other questions? Go have fun. So, what do you think? Did anyone have a challenge in separating context from meaning? The nice thing is, out in the real world, as you take this learning into the real world, you'll have a sense of the difference. And the important thing is, what outcome are you going for? So if you blend them, it's just fine as long as you get the outcome that you want. So what kind of experiences did you notice? What kinds of questions came up for you that you would like to discuss?
So some contexts are just not useful for behaviors, but could be in different situations. Is that the kind of...
Yeah, some behaviors aren't useful in some situations, but they are in others. like me going, rah,